Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to go over a couple of functions in Excel that can be used for rounding time. Okay, so the other day I needed to work on a spreadsheet that involved rounding time, basically hours and minutes up to the next 5 minutes. So let me go over a couple things with time in Excel. I'm going to go ahead and plug in a couple of values here first, just so we kind of have a visual. I'll work right here, roughly in the middle. First thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and put in 12 o'clock and 1 second a.m. And then just so we have another comparison, I'll put 11:59:59 p.m. So pretty much the first second of the day and the last second of the day. So these are times that I've just entered in. Hour, minute, second, space AM, hour, minute, second, space PM. Now, you need to be aware how Excel treats time. So let me put these times over here off to the side. But for these second examples, I'm going to format them in a comma style. And then I'll show more decimal places. And so we get the idea that basically Excel expresses time as a decimal number. Basically midnight is 0 going up to 1 to 11:59 p.m. So between 0 and 1, every time is represented. And this is how Excel can calculate with time. You can add 2 times together, you can subtract 1 time from another, and so forth. So just want to kind of keep that in mind. This is how time works. Now it's very, very similar if I don't necessarily want to put in a time of day, but I also want to express information like in hours and minutes, or minutes and seconds, or hours, minutes, and seconds. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these columns. And I'm going to create a simple little table here. I'll go ahead and put in some time rounded to 5 minutes, and then I'll have time rounded up to 5 minutes. Give myself a little bit of more space here. And just so we can see this in a couple scenarios, I'm going to go ahead and plug in a time of 2 hours. And before I go much further, I'm going to format this time. And I'll do a format cells custom. I'll just do hours and minutes. I don't need to see hours, minutes, and seconds. And there's a time. I'm going to go ahead and plug in another one, 2 hours and 17. And I'll select these and autofill down. So I have kind of a random smattering of times. Now, first order of business is I want to round these times to the next 5 minutes. So, for instance, 2:17 would be 2:20, 2:34 would be 2:35, 2:51 would be 2:50, and so on. To do that, I'm going to use a couple of functions nested. I am going to be reassembling this time using the time function. Now, the time function asks for hour, minute, and second, so the hour is going to be pretty easy. I'm going to be grabbing the hour from my existing time. My next argument is the minute. Now for the minute, I'm going to use the MROUND function. So the MROUND function, well, what number do I want to round? I want to round the minute of my original time, comma, and then the multiple. Well, where do I want to round it to? I want to round it to the next 5 minutes, closing parentheses, comma. So now I'm at the last argument for my original time function, the second. Since I don't care about seconds, I don't really need anything in there. I can just do a closing parentheses. So I'm using the time function to reassemble the time. The hour of my original time, the MROUND minute of my original time with a factor to the 5. I'm going to round to the 5 minutes, and second was unimportant to me. So now when I press enter, my rounded time is 2. Now, so that these are all in the same format of hours, minutes, I'll just use my format painter to take care of that. So, okay, well, that was pretty easy, but what about some of these other ones? Let me autofill down and see if they're correct. 2:17 rounds down to 2:15. 2:34 rounds up to 2:35. 2:51 rounds down to 2:50, and so forth. So I'm using the MROUND function to round those minutes to the closest 5 minute. That required that I reassemble the time using the time function. Now, one slight variation of this exercise. What if I only want to round up to the next 5 minutes? Well, pretty similar. I am going to use the time function again. I'm going to reassemble, getting the hour of my original time. Now for the minute, instead of using MROUND, I'm going to use another function, CEILING.MATH. Okay? So the CEILING.MATH function, it's asking for the number that I want to round. Well, basically, I want to round the minute of my original time, comma, and then the significance, well, that's going to be the 5 again. And then the last argument for the CEILING.MATH function is the mode. Don't really need it for this situation, so I'm going to ignore it, do a closing parentheses, comma, and of course my original time function is looking for second, which I don't care about, so I'm not going to enter a value there, closing parentheses. Let me go ahead and press my enter key so we can see how this works. Of course, 2 hours is at 2 hours, that's fine. Let me autofill down. And so we can see the difference. 217 to the nearest 5 minutes rounds down to 215. But if I want to do the ceiling, go upward, I'm going to round up to 220. 234, 235, that makes sense. Here we go, 251 rounds to 250, but with the math ceiling to 255. So I'm rounding upward to the next 5 minutes. Once again, I'm reassembling the time. I'm using the time function to build the hour from the original time, and then I'm using the CEILING.MATH function to round, or basically, yeah, I guess I'll say round, to round up the minute to the next 5 minutes. So that's a little bit of working with some times in Excel, rounding to a specific minute factor.